Hey, I'm Shane. In this video, I'm going to talk about the Sony Zeiss 55mm f1.8. If there's a classic lens yet for the Sony full-frame cameras, this lens is definitely it. It's probably my easiest lens to recommend when you're first buying the camera. Even though it's very expensive, it's pretty much a perfect lens. And in this video, I'll tell you why. So this is a Sony Zeiss Sonnar 55mm f1.8. This was one of the first lenses Sony released for their full frame cameras, and it's still performing great on any APS-C or full frame camera that is released today. I use it mainly on my Sony a7R III, but I've also been using it recently on my new Sony a7 III, and it works incredible. I'm surprised how well Sony designed this lens, that it works great with the autofocus systems that they put out on the newer cameras. And with the focal length of 55 millimeters, it functions like a 50mm. And with the fast aperture of f1.8, it's great in low light, but it's still incredibly sharp. The small size of this also pairs greatly with the Sony bodies. So with that said, in this video, I'm going to talk to you about why I love this lens so much, how it compares to other lenses on the market, and how it performs in both photo and video. Starting off with the build of this lens, it comes in at a clean 282 grams, which is incredibly light for carrying with you, and it's hard to argue why not to take this lens with you when you're going to take photos. The body of the lens is all metal and even has a partially metal lens hood for it, and it is advertised to have weather resistance. However, it lacks a rubber gasket at the back, so I wouldn't say it's very safe to take out in rainy weather. However, I've done so and I've never had an issue with it. One notable feature of the lens is that it actually has a concave front element, which is kind of nice because it's easier to clean and you're less prone to touch it because it's recessed into the lens and also surrounded by that metal body. So it's very nice for keeping the lens safe, and it's just a kind of bonus perk that I didn't realize when I bought this lens. I'll now move on to the image quality, and this is where this lens is pretty insane. There's honestly not much to say besides it's stupidly sharp. At f1.8, it's sharper than other lenses when you stop them down to like f2.8. It's just performs flawlessly when you're using it. I've never had a situation where I think this lens is not sharp enough, and more often than not, it's too sharp for what I need it for. This lens also boasts Zeiss special coating on the glass, which really shows in when you're having a high contrast situation and there's a lot of backlighting. This lens really is good at resisting flaring, and I find it performs very well in situations where you have a lot of backlighting. As far as vignetting and distortion goes, this lens obviously is going to have some vignetting when you're at f1.8, but it's pretty much negligible and it's very easy to correct in post. And also with chromatic aberration, it's very easily corrected in post. However, it is definitely present and you will run into it in some situations where there is heavy backlighting. I'll move on now to my biggest disappointment with this lens, and that's its minimum focusing distance. It is 50 centimeters, which is not terribly far away, and you can get very close to subjects. However, I came from the Canon Nifty 50 and other lenses like that before, where I felt I could get much closer to my subjects without having an issue. And you sometimes run into that with this lens. Honestly, 99% of the time, you won't notice it, but it is notable to remember that it is a pretty far minimum focusing distance for a 50mm lens. With regards to the bokeh though, it's incredibly pleasing. At f1.8, your backgrounds you can turn to pretty much mush with the fast aperture, and it's not distracting. I really enjoy the character that it gives. Some people have noted that it's a little busier than other lenses, but honestly, I don't find there's any issue with it, and it brings nice character to the pictures you take. When it comes to the autofocus of this lens, in video, it's great. The continuous autofocus works very well. It tracks subjects flawlessly. In photo, it's incredibly fast as well, and it keeps up with the camera. I find it kind of funny, as I said earlier, that this lens was designed for 3 years ago when the autofocus systems were drastically different on the Sony cameras, to even the A9 now. This lens works great with it. If you're manually focusing, this lens works very well as well. However, it is notable to remember that it is a focus by wire system. So you're turning that focus ring without any direct correlation to how the lens is moving. So it can actually have an accelerated curve, which is a little frustrating because the faster you turn the lens, the faster it will move focus, which takes a while to get used to. So by this point in the video, I'm sure you have understood, I like this lens. However, the reason I have a hard time recommending it sometimes is its price point. It comes in at pretty much $1,000 or 1,250 Canadian, which is a lot for a 50mm f1.8. And if you look at other camera manufacturers, they have much more reasonable priced lenses with even faster apertures at this price point. However, it is notable that this lens performs well above any of the other competitions in this like focal length and aperture. It's insanely sharp. So you pay for what you get, but you get a lot more than you really need at f1.8. I'll compare it to the other big three options on the market when you're choosing a 50mm prime for Sony lenses. There's a Sigma Art, a Sony Zeiss, and Sony's own Nifty 50. I'll start off with the Sigma Art. This lens just came out in the past year, natively for Sony E-mount now, and it comes in at $950 US. So it's $50 cheaper than this lens new, which is pretty significant because you're getting a whole lot more light in at f1.4. With that said, the lens is about 800 grams or more, so pretty much 3 times the weight of this Sony Zeiss 55mm. So if you want to make the trade-off for a heavier lens with a faster aperture, the Sigma might be your better option. Though, if price is not an issue, but weight is, and you want the f1.4 aperture on your 50mm, there's the Sony Zeiss 50mm Distagon f1.4 coming in at $1,500 US. It's more expensive, but it's significantly lighter than the Sigma and pairs better with the Sony bodies with a little bit better autofocus performance. So it's probably the most premium option in this price range, focal range I mean, but it's definitely performing very well for what it is. The last option is the Nifty 50 kind of for Sony, which is Sony's own 50mm f1.8. This lens comes in at $250 US, which is very cheap, though it's more expensive than the other options for Canon and Nikon, but Sony's a newer manufacturer and they also generally just have more expensive lenses. The lens performs not the best, and it's hard to compare to this lens because it's basically 4 times difference in price, but the performance is pretty much better across the board, better autofocus, better sharpness. However, if you want a 50mm lens, the 50mm f1.8 is way more accessible and maybe a better option when you're starting out. So in conclusion, the Sony Zeiss 55mm f1.8 is an incredible lens. It's really hard to say anything bad about it, and it performs incredibly. However, in the years since it's released, there's been several good competitors that have come to market that definitely rival it and can make it a harder lens to recommend than it used to be when it first came out. Definitely if you're starting out, I think just a regular 50mm f1.8 might be a better option. However, you are buying a premium full frame camera when you're using this lens on it, so you can't go wrong with the Sony Zeiss. I have used it for a good year and a bit now. I love it, but just note it is very expensive. It's a big investment that will last you. Thanks for watching this video though. Feel free to leave a comment if you have any questions about the lens or you just like the video. I'd appreciate you consider subscribing and liking the video, but you don't need to. Thanks for watching though. I hope you have a great day and I hope this video was useful. See ya.